of the governor's GWAICC Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee meeting. So,
are you impressed with yourself for saying that?
I had to read it off the screen. I am.
Do we have an acronym in the works?
Yes. So that will be task number 1 for the committee. Let's start off with introductions here in the room. My name is Doug Dunham. I'm with Epcor Water, and I am tasked with being the chair of this intrepid subcommittee. So if we start around the table.
Bruce Hallen, SRP.
Reed Blockberger, also with SRP.
Cindy Rule, ADWR. Sandy Favorites, with Freeport.
Susan Craig, Kyle Center for Water Policy. MU State Land Department.
Carol Ward, ADWR.
Zach Richards, AWR.
And on the phone?
They're not saying.
They're not, must be on mute.
Unless. Can you speak on the phone? Are you there, Stephanie? I hope we don't have an issue. We're just not speaking. I know, because I have them muted. I apologize.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm here.
Hi, Stephanie.
Tones.
It wouldn't be the same without you, Stephanie. Okay, so I thought we would just kind of quickly jump into what the committee task is. If we remember from the last committee meeting, there was a quick overview of the report that DWR published on potential storage sites as a result of some legislation that Mrs. Griffin ran. So we issued that report. The general background of it we'll get into here in a second, but the concern of the committee was that the criteria used in the selection of sites for the screening were perhaps a bit too restrictive, and there were probably other potential candidate sites out there that would be worth considering and discussion. So that's our task. There were a couple questions that I had that I thought I would pose to this group is one of the things that happened in the original DWR study was that because of the regulatory questions on how to permit facilities basically to enhance the CNR aquifers in the upper part of the state and the Colorado Plateau area. Those sites were sort of pushed to the side. Not that it couldn't be done, it was just, there were just questions in the recharge team on how to do that. So those areas were kind of overlooked. So my first question is do we want to go back and basically include those types of areas or continue the pattern of the original study?
It seems to me that we should revisit the criteria, and if those fall into the criteria, then yes, perhaps.
I agree. I think depending on the criteria, you can easily go through the Colorado Plateau and make a decision on potential sites or sites that aren't potentially viable.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is yes, to start off with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. So with that in mind, I think that the task that we are asked to do is to take a step back, take a look at all of the sites that were originally identified by the department, and begin to think about overall criteria selection again and starting with a clean slate. So I hear lots of nodding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry I'm late. sorry, Doug?
Yes. On the phone?
So this is Chuck. This is Chuck with CAP. It strikes me that the initial screening criteria about volume was one of the largest exclusionary criteria. And so, just as a suggestion, it might be helpful to start with that criteria and see if the group is comfortable with 20,000 acre feet, or perhaps it should be 1,000 acre feet, which would generate a lot more sites.
Chuck, I appreciate that. That is, in my mind, was one of the big pieces. I guess the two things I remember hearing around the table the last meeting was some of these smaller localized projects versus a larger, AMA style with, trying to store thousands of acre feet. So I think later on in the agenda, I've got a spot reserved for kind of first swipe at site selection criteria. So maybe we can hold off on this until then. But I do recognize it's a great comment, Chuck. Anything else? Jeff, you had a...
Well, I just wanted to apologize for being late, and I don't know what I missed, but what's that? Yeah. Make a note of that in the... So what I just heard is, what did I miss about the plateau? And
one of the original screening pieces we did under the original study was to push aside sites that were on the Colorado Plateau, just because of some of the permitting questions that had happened up to that point. But the committee's view at this point was to let's not pre-screen things, and let's keep that question open, and we could probably refine that as we get into the details of site or criteria selection.
And then just heard that we're going to not take the sites we've already identified. It's just going to be a whole new criteria, or is it be criteria applied to the sites that were already identified? Or we haven't made that decision?
We have not made that decision yet.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
All right. Any other comments on the overall task? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. I think we have a recycle of the, need help here. Technically challenged.
What is it you would like?
The,
Like the PowerPoint?
PowerPoint.
yeah, let's go to the PowerPoint, just so we can review.
That would be the problem.
Yeah.
Now it works.
All right. So this was the presentation that Jeff gave at the last committee, so it's just kind of a quick review of that.
It's on a PDF, so it's not.
Oh, it's not going to work? Okay. Maybe we just go to the next picture. There we go. So this is the background of the Senate bill that initiated the study, and it was basically a short bill to ask the department to conduct a preliminary investigation of acceptable sites to construct new water storage facilities on state trust land, and then identify the 6 most potentially acceptable sites. Water storage facilities can be on the Earth's surface or underground storage facilities as defined by ARIS 45801.01. So what we did in his background is we basically went through at a very high level, think 2-mile high satellite type detail, basically identified which areas of the state had a water course nearby, and then where those courses crossed state land. And then we took a look at whether just really generically, whether that was a hard rock condition, which then we could point to as a potential surface storage site, or whether it was more of a basin fill alluvium or other type material that would be more conducive to underground storage, where we could get infiltration. There was absolutely no review of the volume of water, if the water courses were, as far as legal availability of any of that potential supply, and there was no other review of ownership or other impacts other than whether it was on state land. So it was a very, very high level. Again, the Department of Water Resources had no review, whether from a regulatory standpoint, so whether it was an AMA, INA, or outside of those regulatory overlays. And so the only screening that the department did was whether or not they were near potential places of use. So if it was a highly remote piece of state land with no existing communities or anything nearby, we kind of pushed that down. Then if there were multiple sites along the same stream course, we kind of congealed those together. And then we eliminated, the other big screen that we did was eliminated storage near the Colorado River, and if they were any duplications of areas that were essentially on top of or adjacent to existing USF facilities. So with that real general elimination, we identified over 300 potential underground storage sites within the state. That then was turned over to state land.
You can try your clicker.
Yes, try the clicker now.
No.
Is it on?
I didn't think so. Just let me know.
Okay, I'll give you the high sign.
That's it.
So that those 300 some odd underground sites were then maps and identifying those areas were sent to state land, who went through and further screened those down to 2 of the most high priority sites. Their criteria are listed here. I'll just read through those real quick for those on the phone that may not be able to see it. Those are the eliminated potential sites that within the general stream adjudication watersheds. They considered only areas where water management overlays will be protected, or identified directly benefited state trust lands, such as in the AMAs and INAs, or the permissible transportation basins. The hydrologic properties of the basin and fill or stream alluvium at the potential sites was another criteria. They looked at the depth to water, compared to locations of existing recharge facilities, and they preferenced sites that were located within the AMAs and INAs, again, because of the protection assumed by that regulatory overlay. Unfortunately, nobody that really worked on the details of this criteria are available at state land at this point. So we can only kind of guess at the debates and the reasoning for this. But these were the 2 that were boiled down as far as the underground criteria. So those 2 were Cunningham Wash in the Butler Valley Basin. It is a groundwater transportation basin, and the state land estimated the storage potential at over 20,000 acre-feet. The other site was whitewater wash in Cochise County within the Douglas INA. And they did not come up with a total storage potential. So, that was the result of the study. Pregnant pause there. I got to tell you, from when we identified those original 300 some odd sites, the department, at least from our internal review process, felt that there would be many more potential sites out there that have should qualify as higher priority. But we left that to state land, as far as state land looking at the benefits for their operations. Now, I discussed some of this with Representative Griffin, who unfortunately was not able to be here today. Her original thinking was that while there may be some locations across the state that could benefit from very large operations, very large storage activities, she felt that there were many other communities that could benefit from smaller projects that would have a lot larger local impact on conservation. Essentially, one of her main concerns was she's being told that so much of these potential storm flows are being lost to evaporation, and that these smaller scale projects could really enhance a lot of the local communities. So I know that's one of her focuses on this, and so just with that in mind, since she's not here to express that, I wanted to make sure that we all kind of understand that. So with that, are there any questions or comments on the original methodology that was done by the Department of Water Resources? Let's focus on that first.
No, since you did it and you just explained it well. Yes.
Just a question I had as I was reminding myself of this for many years. Source water availability doesn't seem to be in the criteria. It's interesting because a couple of these spots, one in particular, I had a hard time with because of, at least once everything was applied, the two remaining projects is what source? And, are we comfortable with stormwater retention? I think we have to get our heads wrapped around that.
Right, yeah. The department's review did not consider the source waters at all, and nor the legal availability or anything along that.
Well, but you said the criteria was along a water course, so that technically by default would be the source. How much is there depends on the type of water course.
Yeah. A draw.
But that's where I'm.
I look at the Douglas INA and it's like, huh?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, some of those really don't have a water source.
That's my point.
Yeah.
How does that come out and feed out to the top when it doesn't have a source? And do we need to be concerned about that? I mean, if we don't, we don't. I mean,
I think we do.
If you don't have a source, you don't have a charge.
Why would we identify that as a potential?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how to raise my hand on the phone. I'm sorry.
Just speak up.
Chuck.
The question, so from a hydrologic standpoint, identifying water courses is a natural location for transmissive materials in general. So we might want to avoid over analyzing why water courses were the initial identification, beyond the thought that that's the point at which you, in Arizona, encounter sands and gravels. Second is the long-term augmentation study that we just completed identified enhancement of recharge as a local augmentation tool. So I wonder if we want to continue in that theme with this study.
Well, thank you, Chuck. That's a great point. We do have available on the table outside here, if you can see that, Chuck, the Carrilla report that was produced last August, and I think it was Nature Conservancy and others pointed out at the last meeting, as Chuck just did, there's a whole section in here on enhanced aquifer storage.
And this is it right here.
And so section beginning in page 24 of the study, it already lines out a lot of these same kind of questions that have been identified for the in this report. So do we want to reinvent the wheel? Do we want to?
Well, yeah, and I think, again, that would be part of the criteria. These are kind of unique, specific projects where they slow the water down, allow it to infiltrate. You can put in T-dikes, a variety of things. And then the purpose of why they're doing it is a tad bit different. What's the reason why they're doing it?
The benefit.
They're there to build a mound, to protect the flows of the San Pedro. And so I think those are all items that have to be kind of worked through as part of the criteria and how we're evaluating these things.
Yeah, because in the criteria, it seems to me benefits of the project, whatever size, and I agree that, we shouldn't limit ourselves to huge projects. Smaller projects could benefit a smaller community, and I think that's important to recognize. But I think identifying a benefit would be key in deciding whether or not that location is something that must be prioritized.
And then the source water will dictate so much of what you can and can't do.
Along those lines of benefit, I don't know I don't think you mentioned it, Doug, but one of the thoughts that I had was, what about the places of greatest need? I was thinking back to the strategic vision. Why would you do recharge in a place that already has plenty of sources and plenty of supplies and instead could we focus on areas that were identified in that document or more recent information that have the greatest need and see what we could do to help those areas and use that as a criteria too.
Agreed. Where you have a demand center. That's another criteria.
That just goes right to benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And what benefit are we focusing on? Is it enhancement of streams or is it water supply? I think we have to be very careful.
Right.
So
we're making it easier for you.
Yeah, no. It's just, now we're identifying issues. This is great. So I guess the from what I'm hearing is on my agenda here, we kind of the scope. We are at this point focusing on state trust lands. Do we want to open it up to anywhere else?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's the whole point of the GWAICC.
It's a statewide issue.
Statewide.
Okay. Yes. All right. And then
if it happens to fall on state trust lanes, that's great.
Okay. And then the second question was, did we want to include the Colorado Plateau? And it's pretty unanimous. There's no reason not to. So we'll include that. And then the question C then was the types of storage to include. So far I've heard both the large and small projects. Now I know one of the concerns that Representative Griffin raised was our original identification of storage, or surface water storage, really kind of focused on your traditional dam type structures. And I think we can all agree we're probably not going to be able to identify, and we'll start working on another Roosevelt Dam or something similar. But do we still want to take a look at, is there some potential surface storage sites, or do we want to tend to focus more on underground?
I think it has to do with source, it has to do with a variety of issues. And then if if it seems feasible that you could build a smaller retention facility and they're associated with somebody's water rights or whatever it might be, I think you could include that potentially. But I just don't think you'll have as many sites as you would at underground potential.
So would it be more worth our time, more bang for the buck to focus on the underground at this point?
I think as we look at the criteria, I think
Let
let's
it sort itself out? Okay.
Yeah, I think that will do.
have a location where there's no legal issues,
Mhm.
areas outside of the adjudication.
Mhm.
I think there's potential.
Okay.
Or maybe there's challenges, but you identify what those challenges are.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not eliminating anything so far. Okay.
Right.
All right, so then my
So
Together, yeah.
potentially including retention.
potentially, yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
What about the water management protection? That was an interesting, that also struck me when I saw the other one. You know, groundwater transportation basin doesn't really provide you much protection for long-term storage credits for underground storage. I mean, you're basically just offsetting, and maybe that was the thought process at state land at the time. I don't know, but
Preserve the local supply
Yeah, I
potentially for
know.
the future.
that water management, areas where water management protection, I'm kind of wishy-washy on that.
Right, so it's there's not that much protection an INA offers, right?
Nothing.
There is some protection within an ANA if you are actually developing long-term storage credits versus impacts from an assured supply review. But if you have an existing groundwater right or withdrawal permit or even exempt well uses, that doesn't protect those long-term storage credits from being impacted.
But
So-
if you're focusing on aquifer, enhancement, do you need that protection? I guess if we,
Right.
when you look at the areas of need, go back to strategic vision, the biggest area, or the biggest gap is in the AMAs. But there were other areas of the state where we identified, we have significant needs, where they wouldn't necessarily have those protections, but maybe we let that sort of, maybe you
That's sort of,
remove it almost, because maybe that's something they have to deal with. And that's something that you're gonna develop that site, you gotta deal with, you'll have to work on the protection, or it's really the purpose of the site.
right, that's what I was going to say. It almost gets back to what the intent of that project is. If it's just a slight local enhancement or, again, slowing down to enhance recharge for stream flows, maybe that's not not an issue then. Okay, so, okay.
And you have to just account for the risk of what's going to happen and decide if it's worth it, the potential risks associated with it.
When you have local ordinances that you can work through that.
Exactly.
We don't know all those, and I'm not gonna even try.
Yeah, okay. So then I guess the last question I have from scoping this project out is, what do we see the final product looking like? Would it be a laundry list of sites identified, or would this more be a guidance manual that a local community could also then pick up and say, we didn't get ID'd from this original report, but we've got at least a technical guidance manual here to maybe help us select nearby sites as well.
The original legislation set a plan, which could be anything.
I don't wanna do a plan.
Have a plan. I've done lots of plans. Have a plan.
And we're not tying ourselves to the legislation.
Yeah.
Right, because this is over.
She didn't,
Done.
Yeah.
she had
Yeah.
site selected,
Enough.
really was in her mind.
Yeah.
My suggestion is site identification. Local communities can read the augmentation report and come away with technical ideas on how to address, technical questions in their regions, but I think having a map with locations and tentative volumes and a table showing potential purposes is a greater use.
I think a map would be very helpful.
Map and a table.
Because a map and a table of the criteria.
I think that's all in the vein of the long-term water acquisition study.
Yeah.
To kind of say, here's your potentials and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I know we've kind of touched on this. Were there any other comments on the phone before I move on?
Is Chuck the only one on the phone, or is there?
Stephanie Smallhouse as well.
Doug, this is Stephanie. Actually, just a little clarity on the scope again. So the scope of this would be just to come up with those criteria based upon kind of the things that have been thrown out there today, and then using that criteria, putting together kind of a list of statewide areas where there's potential. So that wouldn't necessarily be a technical document. It would just be an overview to say, if you live in this part of the state, these are areas that we have identified which fit these criteria and where there's potential to do a project if you choose to do that. Is that right? Am I hearing that right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, because trying to do some kind of guidance manual or something would be because there's so many different types that it would be too cumbersome.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to go back to the original DWR list and with the added, take away some of those criteria that you think maybe shouldn't be used, but adding the other criteria to those original sites.
Yeah, if you don't have to read.
I mean, that way we have something to start from rather than starting. GWR's already done identification.
Well, and I'll refer back to Doug that I believe it was just a GIS overlay exercise, and so if we took off the water course component, or I don't think we would take off the surface geology component. We could take off the state trust land requirement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But those were basically the three
Yeah. I
things
think you have
that
to take off
screened.
the water course necessarily,
Okay.
but obviously the state
State
trust
land.
line. But that way we've already got those identified.
Yeah, we could narrow down
Yeah.
the state based on water course and surface geology. That could be a initial cut.
For this group.
That way
Yeah.
we're not starting.
Yeah,
Right.
the state's a pretty big place.
We did.
Do we want to consider, not so much in the AMAs, I'm thinking outside the AMAs, I don't know how many wastewater plants there are that treat and discharge, and that water could potentially be captured or, is that a layer that should be?
So would that
Yeah,
go
that's-
towards
Source,
water?
that source,
Yeah.
it's related to source
That
criteria.
was in the WRDC and the strategic.
So we have all that stuff
Yeah,
already.
that's where.
Right. And that's a good point, Pam, because if we remember from the vision, strategic vision report, identifying the overall shortfall, there was a huge percentage of it that was reduced if we got to full reclaim reuse.
Mm-hmm.
So but again, that's already identified, so if we can just pull that existing data in.
It might be updated too.
Yeah, it's been.
It's old.
Yeah, it's out of date, but
Okay.
it's chart.
So,
Years since,
so we've
6 years since we, no, 7 years for the vision.
time flies when you're having fun.
It's a new class.
Getting old.
So does
Needs a walker.
Not quite.
Not quite. So we've kind of moved into item number 5 there is discussing the site selection criteria. So what I'm hearing at this point is kind of taking a couple steps back, using the GIS-based data that's already available at the department, and basically just at this point, using the three very generic, is water course
And surface geology.
and surface geology.
That's it, only two. Take away the state trust
State,
land.
okay, no longer identifying, do we want to identify state land or just,
I think ultimately we would want to identify land ownership.
Land ownership, yeah.
It doesn't have to be limited
Yeah.
to.
okay,
That would be a criteria.
But is it, but I think,
Just list it.
yeah, it's good to know
okay,
identifying a location on
on federal land?
federal road. Well, I'm,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
that might be beneficial. We have tribes that might benefit from this too.
Mhm.
right,
But to do the paring down,
Yeah.
we won't
We
look
won't
at the
start there yet,
ownership.
yeah.
We'll just, as we drill down, we'd
Yeah.
get into that.
Yeah, yep.
okay. So do we have any specific criteria we would like to throw out at this point?
I would suggest that we've talked about categories of criteria: need, volume, size, source. Nobody's mentioned potential cost. I don't know if that's an issue, but those are categories. Then it's, if you're looking at source, we can say wastewater treatment plants, perennial or intermittent streams, or renewable supplies. That was,
You know, I think you could almost prioritize some of those in that. Source will have an impact on what size you're gonna build, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or how much you're gonna import a lot of water to
Well,
that site, and then that's a huge cost.
well, the source first is the type, and then there's the volume associated with that. Kind of a two-prong.
So would the way to incorporate all that is
Yeah.
have some kind of a source to demand ratio that dictates how efficient a project might be, or?
Because you're gonna want a demand center nearby too, right?
Well,
Yeah.
not,
Unless it's for environmental purposes.
right, not necessarily, it could be just as,
So-
Yeah, I think let's just start with that, and then I think we need to think about that, maybe into,
Maybe-
because the purpose of it, the benefit, I mean, going back to the criteria of, if you've got a benefit for
Mhm.
that location, it could be miles away.
That way you don't have a hard volume, but you say if this is a useful project and
It could benefit, and maybe it's more generic, it could benefit these areas.
Which is a demand,
Yeah,
you know, your demand center, you're doing it for a stream. They're located very closely, not unless, again,
and
you'd have to,
we can get way too technical.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need to
More
keep.
guidance.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I think at the last meeting that we had with the larger group, someone mentioned water quality, but I think that would be towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you have surface geology, so like if there's bedrock, it's,
We're not,
yeah, okay, good.
so it'll have to be a non-hard rock alluvial
Right. Yeah.
surface
Or you
geology.
could actually,
Yes.
So I have a question. Does this include enhanced urban runoff?
Yeah.
Or are we just talking about general storm runoff?
It could include either, I think that goes to store.
Because then you may get into, at least this was something that the augmentation options report pointed out, was that you can get into permitting, and surface water rights.
Yeah.
Yep. Those are all issues.
those, yes, each one of those
Whether we're gonna consider those.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an identification of an issue,
Right.
more than a exclusion. Right.
The barriers.
Yeah.
Maybe the first cut are just, you know, I wanna call them the physical things, volume, the
Right.
location, is there water to put in there, and then there's a second cut that's like
Yeah.
cost, you know, practicality,
rights.
need, what we wanna do with it, and then you get to like the legal stuff and the,
Mm-hmm.
They must have like a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
Yeah.
So it'd be screening,
Tier one would be-
prioritization, and then potential issues.
Yeah, tier 1 would be those that don't have those issues associated with them.
Yeah.
And
Which
so
is
on.
screening, what was that?
How it's
Prioritization, yeah,
and issues.
yeah.
It's quite the analysis.
Yeah, but that's
Most of it from
that's what
our heads.
that's what everybody does,
Yeah.
technical assessments.
Cost.
Yeah,
I don't really want to get into cost. I mean,
Yeah.
we can identify it as an issue.
But not to come up with a number.
Yeah.
No, it's just identifying if it's, I would, large, small,
Yeah.
medium, but that's even maybe too much, just have to build, construct, and operate
Yeah.
facilities,
Yeah.
and there'll be a cost associated with that.
Right.
Transport.
None of these are gonna be free.
Any comments on the phone? Hearing none. So I think we've got our first swipe laid out here from across the state.
So, which is the first two overlays,
First two GIS overlays,
okay?
and then did we want to dive into anything beyond that before our next meeting for this first?
So the first two were water course and surface geology.
Yes.
We want to put source in there too.
Well, that won't be from a GI, we can't, it's not a GIS
Well, you
thing.
could with wastewater treatment facilities.
Both wastewater treatment facilities, right, and thinking,
But you'd have to sort them out by those.
and look at them, and because you'll be able to tell where they're located and whether there is a source nearby.
Or whether they're already being utilized
Clearly a
for,
water, you know,
that's.
mountain front.
Yeah, see, yeah, because
That's part of the first step.
those that have an available supply are different than those just in existence.
Those that are evaporating versus those that are being utilized for
Yeah.
existing demand.
I agree. I was just thinking that if we could identify the categories of the screening tools, screening criteria, then the prioritization criteria, and then we just leave issues of the things that fall out of our, as we talk about the different criterias, then the issues like that come up of whether the wastewater treatment plant is a source, but whether there's an available supply to be had out of that plant.
And DEQ may have that.
Mhm.
That's where we started. We got the list and looked at who's discharging or evaporating versus something else. And I think that's where we started with that list when we looked at this before.
Mhm.
It's in the STORAT data, it's just hard to,
It's hard to
you
get.
need help
Yeah,
to pull that out.
Anything.
Become in a user-friendly format.
I know. It's a very difficult format that they've updated.
What about existing, I'm looking here at a map of, underground storage facilities that are in existence now. So that would be an elimination,
In every
is
case.
that right? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the size of the underground storage facility and the geology.
Well, but if it's already there, why would we identify it again? And then we probably would put some kind of buffer around
Yeah,
it,
I'd put a buffer around it, yeah.
because if anything close to it theoretically could go there.
Yeah, no, and I think the buffer is the important thing.
Mhm.
That depends on the size of the facility.
You should identify.
I'll give you a perfect example. City of Sierra Vista has a wastewater treatment facility that they recharge. Gale wants to put a storm, mountain front runoff collection system and recharge. I don't think we're gonna pipe it down to the treatment facility, but we could still build something in the city and have it, they're just both gonna be contributing to the system. So it's not, the existence of a facility isn't necessarily gonna eliminate something else.
Yeah, that's what I don't wanna on the first cut eliminate because of the existence of an underground storage facility.
Right.
Well, the aquifer, you mentioned the alluvial, infiltration. That seems focused on like a spreading basin kind of thing, and we had said we weren't gonna limit our criteria. Building dams is expensive. Probably, to me, just from my perspective, doesn't seem likely that like Doug said, we're not gonna do another Roosevelt Dam, but would that parameter eliminate any places, because you want like hard rock, right?
Yeah.
The bedrock, and
Yeah,
that's
the
where
bedrock,
source
yeah.
water comes in.
Yeah. I think we have to be careful about your perspective of what's expensive it differs amongst the different users in the state too.
Because we can do injection wells if you've got the money.
Or industry could front the cost for something larger.
I'm just wondering if that criteria would,
I think we're so used to our state perspective of, nothing, it's too expensive, but private industry and maybe a collection of communities may have a better chance of funding something that we might deem, from our own perspective, as cost prohibitive.
We've got to have some kind of initial screening, because now, including the plateau, you've just opened everything but the Strip and Navajo reservation. So you got to be able to narrow it down somehow, some way. But
I think you're removing bedrock to begin with, that removes that.
Yeah. But with wells, with injection wells, you don't necessarily have to have the alluvium per se at the surface.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe you do the first two criteria and then you do a quick analysis on the source. I think you have to. Because you're going to come up with a bunch of areas in the Colorado Plateau.
Yeah, there's no source.
There's no source, or it's very limited. So maybe you could put a criteria in there, very limited or something like that. I mean,
then let's come up with a source criteria so that, because I know wastewater treatment plants, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, wastewater treatment plants, but then you've already got water course on here, so that could potentially be a source. You get mountain front recharge, potentially could be a source. Mountain front runoff, I mean. For instance, Sierra Vista.
Right.
Yeah.
So so I'm thinking about the map, and because then I would just,
you could almost
any mountain range with wherever the alluvial starts.
An alluvial,
that's where it would.
You could do something like that. Are there any?
Realistically, too, you could recharge in the pediment where it's still.
Yeah.
Because it'll still get underground and still flow in the same direction. But see, the mountain front, all you have to do is find a place where there's a mountain, and then say, and where there's a. Oh, so then okay, so we'd cut that down. Okay, that works.
Yeah, you have the intersection of alluvium and.
And you could even look at, precip.
That's what I was thinking.
Which is going to eliminate a lot of.
If it's a smaller mountain range, they get 10 inches a year, but if it's 20, 30, okay. A larger mountain range runoff, maybe. Could look at something like that.
Which is northern and southern Arizona.
So that, I mean.
Their geology is going to limit northern Arizona pretty significantly on that, at least from that first cut. And not taking into account injection. I'm sort of.
Well,
the source will be, you still have to have a source supply for the injection. Trying to figure out how to make this first cut easy.
Exactly.
Then we can, maybe that's it, maybe keep it pretty minimal.
Then we can sit down and look at it.
And that would generate a big bucket full.
Yeah.
But that was the general feedback we got was, the original study just windowed out way too many potential sites. So, But we gotta keep it realistic, cause every single piece of the state potentially has some sort of, we gotta narrow this down. I think this first cut right now, is.
And use your discretion,
Yeah. Just say, here are my
We trust you.
assumptions, this is what we did.
We
That's
trust
fine.
you.
Yeah.
I think I've heard in the larger group, and I don't know how to do this, but I'm just saying it because I heard it in the larger group, mentioned, I guess it would be storm flow, and I know there's issues with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard other people suggest that if there was a way to slow that down, we could get more recharge from it, from built-up urbanized areas. Is there a way to calculate that as a source? Do we want to put that in there?
Well, what storm flow, you're talking about over?
Urban runoff?
Urban runoff, are you talking
Like
about?
hardscape.
Yeah, hardscape and capturing that so that it doesn't just wash right through when there's a large storm event, a way to slow it.
Urban runoff that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be more of a local thing, 'cause what are we gonna, you have a populated area, even Sierra Vista for Gail, that's what she's talking about capturing. But, and all she has to do is go outside of the city and wherever, all the drainage, we'd have to review drainage plans to see where all of that's going.
Yeah, it's very engineering intensive.
Right, and that's just, we can identify where the places where it could be put.
Do we even want to but could we at least address it somehow and
I think maybe
write-
that's a narrative
have a
note at the
paragraph
end
and
of it.
say, this is a good idea to capture this, but
Yeah.
it's beyond, it would need engineering technical review.
Yeah,
It's beyond our
And
scope.
because that's every urban center in some manner.
you could, it's.
Yeah, they're so sporadic and so
Yeah.
intense that, and that's what I know that's what Gail's really trying to get at, is all that's running off and most of it's evaporating.
I think that's a narrative at the end.
Right,
I think if we don't put it in there,
Yes, we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't try to map it.
And that goes to better urban design, better urban planning,
Yeah, you
and
could
there are a
do some of
whole
that
host
stuff.
of hurdles that are involved there.
water quality.
Yeah, and,
Mhm.
but, better integration of low-impact development measures,
Mhm.
Yeah, look at
which
what.
have multiple
and-
benefits.
Yep.
And fewer impervious
Yeah.
surfaces.
Yeah, so rather than
surfaces that
trying to go,
absorb water.
at the end
Mhm.
of all of this and capture it when you've got a ton of water and big engineering challenges, you need to go back in and integrate this
Redesign.
Yeah.
into the urban environment.
Yeah, I think what we can use as an example of what Tucson's done.
Yes.
Water's done, and like I said, make that a
Mhm.
narrative at the end, and
Mhm.
sort of what they looked at
Yeah.
as far as criteria might be helpful to educate this.
Mhm.
Nudge that on too.
But I definitely wouldn't try to map it.
No.
No, I think
That's
it's too complicated for this
Mhm.
process.
Put an X on every city and go.
Potential recharge here, capture your runoff, your urban runoff, and do something with it.
Go to every single county flood control district and go, big, there you go.
Yeah.
I wouldn't attempt to do that. I think that's an afterthought.
Yeah.
An
Build that in.
afterthought, but
Yeah, we need to mention.
not a mappable.
Yeah, and that is always a source of resistance too. So if we don't, at least it recognize it.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
So what I'm hearing so far is kind of cutting down with the surface geology and streams. I think that was the water courses, yeah. And then, so I've got 3 potential source things to include: wastewater treatment plant locations. Then my first question is, that's a point. So what do we assume that it's just that point, or do I put some? We can go 5 miles in either direction?
Assume the point for
Okay.
now. I would keep it simple, because
Okay.
you don't know what there's zoning issues and all sorts of stuff that we wouldn't,
Be worried about, okay.
I wouldn't want to get too deep into that. I think it's the point, the source location, now you can move it. If you want to build the infrastructure to move that water somewhere else, and that's a local decision and not.
But here's my point: if I have a polygon that's 50 miles square, and I have a wastewater treatment plant in the middle of it, where's the recharge potential? Is it this whole thing? Or is it just the site right here?
For now, I would just keep it at the site.
The site, okay.
There may be some inhibiting factors
Other things,
on
okay.
every single one of those, but I think for the purposes of what we're doing, it's locating that site.
Okay.
That's a potential, I mean, it hits the source. There might be some geologic limitations at that site that may pop out right away, but.
Flagstaff, if
Yeah.
they're sitting on bedrock. And then,
but
so then I have
doing water courses.
that will be included too, yep.
Might want to include the CAP canal as a source.
Okay, yeah.
Or any other large, I can't think of any other large canals, but something
There's
like that.
some electric company that
Yeah.
does something with it.
Yeah, but.
Well, for that matter, you've other different.
So did you just say the source is CAP water? Is that what I heard?
No, canal.
Canal, potential.
Infrastructure, is infrastructure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let it go, Chuck, let it go.
More wheeling.
Exactly.
Right, because, yeah, that's what we want to do is, yeah, wheel water and then pour it on the ground. Anyway, okay.
You might.
You never know. Some weirdo might want to do that.
Somewhere.
I know, right? I mean, it all started with,
People out there.
it all started
Okay.
with Pima County South.
Yes.
South. Anyway, I'll let you cover that, Andy. All right, thank
So
you.
we've got wastewater treatment plants, the water courses are already there. I'll identify the areas down at the bottom of the mountains that tend to have favorable precipitation.
Stormwater, yeah.
And then some level of, some significant infrastructure
Right.
where that exists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I have for the source.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that's plenty.
Want to start there?
Yeah.
That's gonna be,
Like that's
It's a pretty big net.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then put this on a map. That's kind of what we want to see, right?
And a list for when you meet next, because we'll be able to read everything off the map.
A list, you mean just,
A list of the things that you're showing on the map,
yeah,
yeah.
well, sure, a legend, that'll be
Yeah.
on. But I'm not, I don't really want to, and hopefully everybody will agree, I don't really want to write any kind of
No.
report or anything.
No.
Just
No.
kind of say,
Yes.
these are what we considered and
Yeah.
this is the result. Okay.
Should we group them in some way by water planning area or?
Why don't we just
basin,
get the
or-
map first, and then,
Yeah.
I mean, for the list, I guess you could do the water planning area, but I think right now, this is the start.
Okay.
And then we can worry about character, you know.
Yeah, let's see what we got.
Down.
And-
Let's see where we land,
I
and
think it's gonna be a lot.
it's gonna be overwhelming anyway.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to have the map up on the screen so we can kind of zoom in and out, toggle on and off during the meeting?
And that's what we struggled with in the original report was, the first couple swipes was dots all over the state.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
We can have 4 maps, 4 quadrants or something.
right, so well, we're gonna have to scale it so we, you can actually see something, but I think if we have the interactive ability here, it'd be great.
I think I'd just rather leave it to you, that
Yeah,
you'll know what to do.
but whatever we
I have a lot of.
produce now, yeah. Do you want to rethink that?
I rethought that a long time ago, and came up with the same conclusion.
Yeah,
I think just for our next review, however you think to put it up there, I think will be
Yeah.
helpful.
Well, whatever we produce, yeah, I'll make it.
And again, don't want to overburden the department,
Yeah.
we gotta keep this reasonable, so.
And my mind's already running about
See?
where I gotta go and who's gotta do what, so, okay. Yeah.
I'm thinking another criteria might be depth of bedrock. If it's 100 feet bedrock, and it's alluvium, that may not be the best spot. But then it depends on what kind of
Yeah.
recharge you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. But those are all things that we'll have to discuss.
Yeah, because there are places where even if it is only 100 feet could be replenishing supplies that are getting pumped, so. But
I think those are more important.
Trying to make it easier for you, but
I think those are the more needy areas.
right, because in theory, after we get through this cut of source, we're gonna have other criteria that will apply, which might be things like that will further winnow down the list.
Right. All right, I think we have our.
Carol,
What's that, Jeff?
you got all the
You know I do. What's not in my notes is on the recording.
oh, this is being recorded.
All right, any other comments or questions on the phone? Hearing none, is anything else last around the table here? So Jeff's got his tasks laid out in front of him.
Indeed, he does.
His.
Excited we. Oh.
Oh, yeah.
He walked in the room.
Yeah, I came in late.
Yes, that will.
That will teach you, sir.
Damn it.
All right, maybe for next meeting, should we set a date? I'm gonna look to Jeff to see how much time he thinks he's gonna need. 2 weeks?
Well, that was gonna be my minimum, yes. We'll shoot for 2 weeks.
Okay.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You can, I don't know, what's the timing on the other end?
3 weeks, I just negotiated.
Yes.
3 weeks.
Yeah,
Okay.
So that's
Jeff, we-
around the 14th.
Folks doing
February.
everything, or?
Yeah, because I don't even know if we have you don't have wastewater treatment plants, but,
So February
Well,
4th.
I was going to say, if you have a few minutes after, I actually am working with wastewater treatment plants right now with Big Day, and I think it would be really helpful.
Yep.
okay.
Maybe we can connect.
So February 14th would be a Friday. That's also Statehood Day.
Isn't that Valentine's Day?
No,
Statehood Day.
Statehood Day.
Wow.
February 14th.
And that would open up the possibility of our electeds to be able to attend as well.
Yes.
So, does that work?
Can we move out to the 21st? That might be better.
I can tell you this room is set for business review.
Yeah.
In the afternoon.
Yep.
On the 14th?
Yep.
We'll find
Find a
something.
space.
It's a small group.
Is it just this group you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Then never mind.
We can meet in the cafe downstairs.
Morning works good for everybody?
Yeah,
Okay? This
sure.
time.
Date did they say?
14th.
Oh.
Sorry. All right, Cindy, so if you could find a meeting spot and get us a time,
I will.
that would be much appreciated.
I will do that this afternoon.
Right. Okay.
Analysis this afternoon?
Yes.
What do you got? Yeah, come on over.
All right, with that, I believe we are adjourned. For those attending on the phone, thank you very much. And we'll be sending out the new next meeting date later this afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you.